Testing, testing, testing. All right, we are live for this week's Genesis Gateway Roundtable Discussions. Beneficial owners, do me a favor and check your channels to make sure that you are streaming and that your audio is clear. If you all can hear me, please put a 1 in the chat. Put a 1 in the chat if you can hear me clearly and you can see my screen. All right, perfect. All right, we always have to do an audio and visual check just to make sure that you all can hear us. And I'm checking one thing on this side just to make sure. But in the meantime, good evening, everyone. How's everybody doing tonight? How is everyone doing tonight?
Doing well. Doing well.
Great.
Thank
Great.
you.
Doing good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good.
Excellent.
I'm doing pretty good. It's so good to hear you all's voices on the call. We still have people that are coming into the room, but we're going to go ahead and move forward with today's discussion. So we are in session 4. We've already done 4 sessions, I believe. I think it's actually 5 sessions, but the first one was sort of kind of like an intro, but we are in session 4 for the Genesis Gateway table discussions. Our little disclaimer is that these calls are being facilitated by a conglomerate of beneficial owners, right? And so by your entrance into these calls, you do acknowledge that you are entering into a trust relationship, right? So you are responsible for how you choose to utilize information that is being disseminated to you every single week, right? So this week in session 4, we're going to be talking a little bit about taxation, inflation, and economic extraction under the elements of these different various real life issues that people are dealing with. Everything from the paychecks shrinking due to inflation, people losing their houses, dependence on public assistance, the government shutdown, all of these different programs that came to a screeching halt as a result of the government shutdown. So these are some of the things that we want to just chat with you all about tonight. All right. So my name is Nadiva. For those of you that are not familiar with us, so very nice to meet you all here that are on the live Zoom call with us, in addition to those that are out there on YouTube. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to the speaker for this evening. Mikhail, are you there? Are you there?
Yes, thank you, Nadiva.
Oh, you're
and
welcome.
Greetings to everyone as well. Look forward to kind of having a conversation with everyone this evening over a couple, 2 or 3 different topics, because we want to establish what is real and what's not real, what is fake and what's not fake. What do we need to focus on and what we actually need to set aside as if it was a distraction to us. And we're today in a world where a lot of things that we see are AI and it's not even real. Well, when it comes to the financial industry, there's a lot of things that are fake as well, and it's not even real. So we'll talk about what's real and what's not real as we look at taxation, inflation, the economic scenario that we all have been a part of, and we'll kind of break some of that information down. We don't have a lot of time on this call this evening, but I do want to kind of go over a few things to give you some insight this evening. So let's talk about inflation. because I love this word inflation. Let me ask everyone in the chat, is inflation real? If it is real, put a 1 in the chat. Put a 1 in the chat if inflation is real. So, inflation. And we can always look at the definition of inflation. But inflation is tied to the public side of the financial industry, tied to the public side of commerce. Inflation is a terminology or a term that is utilized to leverage investing to their benefit. And when I say their benefit, I'm talking about the government. It could be leveraged for the financial industry to correct or change interest rates because those interest rates fluctuate. And they will give you the reason for the fluctuation as, well, inflation. Inflation does not even exist in a private perspective or on the private side of commerce. There is no inflation. So that is a term used to leverage and to also financially oppress individuals. So there's a lot of terms like that, like income, that are terms that were created to be used as a tool to control the masses, control the U.S. citizen, or as some might describe it, the slaves in this particular jurisdiction that we're in. And so these words, we need to really examine and know what they mean and determine if it's a fake word in the public or if it's, if it's a real word that could be utilized in the private as well. So inflation, yes, it's definitely not a real word. It's a fake word created to control. And that leads us over also into going into taxation and how that is set up. It is set up in a way to control as well. Now, don't get me wrong. These words, these systems and these processes out here in the public, they're all created to control the U.S. citizen and continue to financially oppress the U.S. citizen, because from my own perspective, the U.S. citizen is a slave across the board. There's too much information out here that validates what I just said. And, we can always present that information as well to utilize to help us understand what's really going on around us. So one of the topics that, we were discussing were paychecks. Because if you are a W-2 employee, there's some things that we need to understand about paychecks. Those paychecks that you receive from your employer because you are an employee and you believe that your employer is graciously exchanging his or her revenue or their revenue for the labor that you are providing that employer. That's what you believe. That's what you've been taught. And you will stand on that because they have displayed in your face that when you exchange your labor, you are receiving compensation. And because of that, repeatedly taking place over and over again, every week, 2 weeks, every month, for 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12, 20 years, you say, I can't deny this is the truth that I'm living. And so that's something that has to be analyzed, and we want to analyze that. Now, when I mentioned inflation, there's different aspects of that tie in to areas that you're involved in the public. And Nadiva, did you have anything to share about inflation as well? Because I want to segue into a couple other areas.
Yes, so inflation is very tricky because if you're not educated, it's going to have you to have a certain perception about the economy. And just like Mikhail said, inflation affects wages, it affects debt, it affects your cash flow, it affects a number of things. And Mikhail, I'm not quite sure on what direction you want to go, but I just wanted to plug that in because there's something else on the other side of inflation that people are not realizing. They're just not realizing this. But I yield the floor back to you.
Thank you, Nadiva. And what you said is very true. So think about this. The word fraud. Anytime you see fraud, 10 times out of 10, anything that's touching that fraud is also a part of the fraud. And so when you look at inflation, inflation affects wages. What wages are we talking about? Because what does wage mean? Or the plural wages? What is wages? Or what are wages? We have to really understand that word because if it's tied to inflation, and we know inflation is not a true topic or true word that we should apply, and we cannot apply that in the public and the private, but only in the public, then what else is tied to inflation that we need to examine? Wages. There are no wages. There is no inflation. What else is touching inflation? That's very important as well. Now, let me give you an example. Inflation, they tied it to interest, but it's not truly connected to interest. So they're two separate things, but they tied it, inflation, to interest for your benefit, the U.S. citizen. But you have to understand it's not really connected. But they, in the public, connected that to something that's valid, to something that's real, to something that you can see on the public, but more so in the private, because interest is real. It's a real thing. So they took that inflation aid, connected it, tied it up to interest. But that is so they can manipulate interest, manipulate the money supply. So we need to be able to see that as well. So you got to ask yourself, interest, is that real or fake? And if it's real, put a 2 in the chat. And I believe everybody would put a 2 in the chat because they understand that there is some type of interest out there in what we're doing and what we're seeing.
Yes.
So you have to also, that's another caveat, that you understand what's real and how the public tries to connect what is fraud or what is fake to what is real. Because that's what the enemy does. He takes what is fake and tries to merge it with what is real to confuse you. So when we look at the paychecks, as I mentioned earlier, you really think or people believe that because they have transferred or given their labor over to an employer for a paycheck, and it's been done over and over and over again for decades and decades, that it's actually real. It's the truth. That's what's happening. That's what you see. But looks can be deceiving because we know, if anybody's on the chat, on this Zoom call today, where does your paycheck come from? Just put it in the chat. If you know where your paycheck comes from, if you are transferring your labor to an employer, where does your paycheck actually come from? Does anybody know? Because that's very important for you to know the truth as opposed to the lie that you believe is the truth.
Someone says it comes from your trust account. Someone else says
that is correct.
Your estate trust.
That is 100% correct. We live in a sinful world where employers want to get as much out of you as they possibly can without exchanging any value for that labor that they're receiving from you. Now, that is the mind of this world and the mindset of these corporations. I want the labor, but I don't want to pay for it. I want it for free. Where do they get that concept from? Let's go there. From slaves. They received free labor from slaves. They didn't exchange anything for that labor. And they enjoyed the wealth that came from that free labor. So they created a system whereby they can continue to receive that labor without going into their pockets and providing any compensation for it. That's the system that we are in today. So that means that they are not going into their pockets to provide any compensation for the labor that you provide that employer. They are greedy. These are the characteristics of corporations in a sinful world. And it has never changed. And so now you can see the employers as the taskmasters. They are receiving, but not reciprocating any value for what they're receiving. So it's important to know where your paycheck is coming from. And I saw in the chat, people are sharing their response to where your paycheck comes from. It comes from you. It is very sad. It is very sad, very true. And unless we make a change, unless we do something different, we will forever be suffering for our ignorance. Now, you can believe a lie or you can believe the truth. You can live a lie or you can live based on truth. That's up to you. But I tell everybody, if that's what you want to do, you want to live the lie, believe the lie, don't complain. Just don't complain. And no one is going to allow you or force you, I will say, to change how you feel, what you believe in. Believe what you want to believe. Just don't complain. Continue to live the life that you are living. Continue to work that 9 to 5. And just know that your paycheck is coming from you, not from the employer. He's giving you your own paycheck. It's coming out of your account, but you can't see that. Now, another topic that we want to touch on as well. So many people have, and you think about this, they have mortgages, they have homes, they have loans, homes, cars. That's very important. And Nadiva, did you have anything you want to mention about this as well? Because, we've discussed this many times as well.
Yes. Actually, before you go to the mortgage discussion, there was one thing that I wanted to circle back on in terms of inflation, right? So we all know that inflation is engineered financial oppression, all right? It's not natural, like Mikhail said. It is a created condition. They do this by doing things like expanding the money supply. They increase debt obligations, they devalue wages so that your purchasing power is less. You're getting the same money, but you have less purchasing power, right? And so when that happens, it creates a systemic dependency, especially on the banks, the lenders, and government programs. People become more dependent on the system because they have less purchasing power. So this is where people have to get into different types of public assistance, food stamps, etc., right? And so ultimately what happens with inflation is that it transfers the wealth from the public to the private banking elites. It really, really does. And this is what we're dealing with in these discussions regarding the woes of Babylon. Okay. Now, the last point that I want to make is that inflation cannot touch trust assets when structured correctly. It simply cannot touch your trust assets. Now, you have people out in the public, on the public side, that are struggling from inflation, but you have those people that are operating by utilizing trust technology they're just fine. They're just fine. They're just fine. And why are they fine? Because when your assets are structured correctly utilizing trust technology, inflation, it doesn't affect you. It does not affect you. And that's the point that I wanted to just leave you all with when you're thinking about inflation. So you have to ask yourself a question. How are you structured? Are you operating utilizing the trust? Right? When a trust operates as a separate legal or equitable person, those assets are not touched. A trust is going to determine the way that those assets are taxed, or if they are even taxed to begin with. So these are some of the things that you want to keep in mind. If you're not operating utilizing trust technology, then the topic of inflation is going to continue to plague you because you're not properly structured, right? So you have to be able to set yourself apart and operate outside of the personal inflationary pressure. This is very, very key and very important to moving forward. And I yield back to you, Mikhail.
Thank you very much, Nadiva. That is very important. I'm looking at the situation from the perspective of the majority of people in this country today. When it comes to paychecks, when it comes to inflation, is it real or is it fake? Taxation. We'll get a little bit more into the taxation as well. And I was going to start talking about homes and loans as well, because at the end of this discussion, you're going to see a different side of these topics. But the topics initially are all about where you are today if you are operating in the public. Because I want you to see that there's an opposite side, which is the private, to everything that we've discussed. Now, Nadiva mentioned some information that I'm hoping that you will take and compare it to where you are today. Trust technology is very important. It's key to understanding the difference between public and private. All right? And how you operate in a private is not how you operate in a public. So as we look at these topics, I want you to find yourself in the public. And then what we want to do is we want to touch on the private side of these topics. As I mentioned before, inflation doesn't exist in the private, but there are other scenarios that exist in the private, but it's totally structured differently than it is in the public. And so when you look at loans, and you can home loans, car loans, those type of scenarios, there is a debt credit system in the public that you are involved in and you don't even know it. And there's nothing you can do about that in the public. Why? Because you are a U.S. citizen. And a U.S. citizen is what? Slave. Just as a slaves 200, 300 years ago. You are exchanging your value for what you think is value in a vehicle or a home. But the value that you exchanged is 100 times greater than what you are receiving in a home or a car or whatever that, what I call a perk. You're receiving a perk. You're giving them, let me give you an example so that you can really understand. You know, I used to tell people, you go to a gym, you want to work out, you got a membership. You go to that gym to work out, you got a membership. They got free towels in there, hot towels. You can use those those hot towels, as many as you want. Go to the sauna, they got towels for you. The towels are considered a perk. The membership, the paperwork, the account is the value that they're receiving. But when you get a car, that is considered a perk. That car can be valued at $10, $15, $20, $30,000. The paperwork to acquire that perk, which is the car, the vehicle, is 10 times more in value than the vehicle. Is that a fair trade-off for you? Because that's what's happening in the public. So you want to understand first what's taking place in the public, how you are exchanging your value again for little to nothing, and how they will continue to profit off of the value that you gave to them when you are receiving a vehicle that is immediately depreciating as soon as you drive off that lot till it gets to a point where it has no value. And yet they are still profiting off of the value that you gave them 2, 3, 4 years ago. And the same thing goes with the home. You're receiving a roof over your head as a tenant. Think about that. If you look at your documents, the word tenant is in there. How can you be a tenant? Didn't you buy the house? Can a U.S. citizen or slave really buy a house? You gave your value. They took that value, and the house may be $100,000 home, but they took at least $1 million or more, a lot more, and they're still profiting off of that. And 5, 10 years down the road, you lose the house in foreclosure. So now they got that back as well. And they're still profiting off of the value that you initially gave them. Is that fair? To some people, they don't believe it's fair. You know, I just talked to a gentleman. He was fighting to keep his mother's home from going into foreclosure, and they lost a home where she's homeless. This is their family home. And then he sends me a message a week later. He had a heart attack and she's in the hospital. This is what this system, this economic system in the public is doing to people. They do not care. The enemy does not care. He will forever be financially oppressing those who are considered U.S. citizens in this jurisdiction. Nadiva, you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, it's all a form of financial oppression, and many of what the system is doing is a form of silent taxation, right? It's just the way it is, and it keeps you in the debtor position when you're constantly trying to climb the never-ending stairwell. You know how you're climbing up a flight of stairs, and it's hard to go up those steps if you're carrying a lot of baggage. But when you get to the top of the steps, you're up there and it's easier to go down. So the financial oppression is all of the baggage and everything that you're carrying while you're walking up the steps. So the key is to get to the top of the stairwell, release all of your baggage so that you can come back down easier than when you went back up. And so that's essentially what operating in trust technology with status correction is. It lessens or loosens the amount of financial burdens and the baggage that you have while you're trying to climb up those stairs, right? And so you want to bring yourself out of the debtor position. Everything out here is debtor creditor. Everything. If you don't immediately begin to express distress, you automatically fall into a debtor creditor relationship. And so you're going to be subject to inflation. You're going to be subject to the taxes. You're going to be subject to the debt, right? You have to get on the other side. You got to get on the other side of the ledger to eliminate that dependency on the system and dealing with the loss, financial loss that Mikhail is speaking of.
That is correct. And how do we do that? How do we pivot and move in another direction from all the pitfalls that have been placed in front of us? They're betting on you to lose. And you think they're smiling in your face because they like you. And that's never been further from the truth your entire life. So there are some clips also that, we want to share, with everyone as well. Let's see. Dave, do you have one of the clips?
I do. And this is important. This is important because now when you're listening to politicians speak on TV, you want to pay attention to the language that they're using and specific wording that they're using so that you'll know who they're speaking to and who they're speaking about. So when Mikhail is speaking about the private side, what does that look like? What group of people encompasses the private side? So when you hear the politicians speak about the private sector, you got to ask yourself a question. Okay, well, who are they speaking about? So let me ask you all a question. Do you all remember ever listening to a speech by a president or a politician where you've heard them make mention of the private sector? Put a 3 in the chat if you've ever heard them mention the private sector. Right. Okay. So this is something they've been saying this for years, but when you hear it, a lot of people I don't know if people are really paying attention to when they hear that term, exactly who they're speaking about. All right. So let's play these 3 clips here.
Knew those founding fathers that outside of its legitimate functions, government does nothing as well or as economically as the private sector of the economy.
He said the government does nothing as well or equally as the private sector of the economy. Let me ask you all a question. What happened during the government shutdown? What actually happened? Did everything just come to a complete halt? I mean, I know some government programs did, but did the world just stop? Or were there still things happening behind the scenes?
Yeah, well, definitely it's happening. Definitely.
Yeah. There were things happening behind the scenes. So that government shutdown was an illusion because it may have shut down on the public side for United States citizens to some degree for certain things, but that private sector was still moving. It was still moving.
And that's key for those in the public to really understand that the rules, regulations in the public are not the same rules and regulations when it comes to the private.
That's right. Here's another one.
And with status.
I'm sorry, go ahead. You said with status?
With status, it changes your situation. You're not a U.S. citizen. You're not a slave.
That's right.
That's going to be important for you to really understand the transition from public to private. Status is paramount. It changes the situation.
Yes.
Go ahead with your clip.
All right.
Million jobs over the last 3 million jobs over created. 4.3 million jobs over the last 27 months. Over 800,000 just this year alone. The private sector is doing fine.
He said the private sector is doing fine. The private sector is doing fine. And now they even put this in movies. And here's the last clip for you all.
Einstein did his best stuff when he was working as a patent clerk. You know how much a patent clerk earns? No. Personally, I like the university. They gave us money and facilities. We didn't have to produce anything. You've never been out of college. You don't know what it's like out there. I've worked in the private sector. They expect results.
They expect results. They expect results. The powers that should not be are depending on those individuals with status to help stabilize the United States economy. I'll say it again. They're looking to people like you with status to help stabilize the United States economy. Let that sink in. Mikhail, I yield back to you.
Now, that last clip, that was a movie.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if anyone noticed what movie that was. Did it tell you what movie that was?
That was Ghostbusters.
That was Ghostbusters.
Mm-hmm.
That was Ghostbusters.
Yep, it was
Okay.
Ghostbusters.
Okay. I kind of tie that in, see that was Ghostbusters. We have to bust these ghosts that don't exist in the private, but they exist out here in the public. There's a lot that you see out here in the public that they want you to focus on that has nothing to do with the private at all whatsoever. And that gentleman, I think his name is Dan Aykroyd. Mm-hmm. He was also in another movie that kind of ties in because there's a public and private side when it comes to investing. And he was in an investment movie as well. And we have to understand the difference between public and private, how it operates. We know everything about the public, or so we think, but everything works and operates differently in the private. So we looked at some scenarios here, and we want to kind of touch on these scenarios from a private perspective. So let's look at, for instance, a loan. How do you operate and how do you handle a loan from a private perspective? That's very interesting because there's interest that belongs to you on every single loan. They're creating securities. There's a CUSIP number tied to the account as well. Those securities will continue to generate interest. Now, some of that interest or all of it actually belongs to you, but it's been redirected because you gave them permission to redirect it. You gave them permission to redirect the interest that you should have received that would have actually offset any debt that they claim that you owe. So you have to understand what's really going on and then move differently in the private sector, operate differently in the private sector, so that you can claim what is yours, rightfully yours, and live your life from an entirely different perspective. So I'm kind of giving you some insight, not going deep into what this scenario looks like from the private sector, but I want you to understand what's really going on from a private perspective as it applies to a car loan, home loan, and other financial accounts as well. So there's interest tied to every account. Why? Because your value was leveraged. Your value creates interest that they retain. They don't give it to you. They keep it. So when you come into the private sector, you're going to start collecting interest that belongs to you on every single account. Now, if you collect interest on, say, 10 different accounts, that could generate millions. do you really think you would be working a 9-to-5 job if you were in that scenario?
I have a question.
If you would still work a 9-to-5 job in that scenario, and you're now receiving interest, put a 2 in the chat. I'm kind of curious. Put a 2 in the chat. If you would start collecting the interest, and you would also work a 9-to-5, put a 2 in the chat. I'm very curious to see if you really understand what you're saying you're going to do, because that would be considered a form of commingling, because you don't want to be an incompetent minor and a competent adult at the same time. It's one or the other. An incompetent minor is going to be out there on a 9-to-5. A competent adult is not going to be out there on a 9-to-5 in the public. He's going to be in a private collecting his interest, operating with status in a higher jurisdiction. So there's much to learn when it comes to the private sector or the private side of the industry, economic, commerce, financial industries. There's more that we can share with you. Of course, we don't have all the time in the world to do that this evening, but we want to be able to start giving you information that causes you to think, cause you to say, hold on, there is something else here that I don't know and don't understand. I need to know more. That's why we're here, because we know you need to know more. Everybody in the public does not want to be there, and they know something is not right, but they can't put their finger on it. And some people are so conditioned, they will never leave that plantation, ever. Nadiva?
You said plantation. I want you all to go and watch the movie, The Jones Plantation. Put that on your movie night list. You got to go watch that movie. You have to, because it's going to help you to see what's actually happening right now. Literally happening right now. You got to go watch that movie. Somebody in the comment section said they have us thinking that the public sector is the government and the private sector are the corporations. That's important. Everything is reversed. Everything that they tell you, think the complete opposite. It is reversed. They do have people thinking that the private sector are the corporations. That's not true. Corporations are public. All of the corporations roll up to the mother corporation, which is the United States, right? These are all publicly traded corporations. They're registered with the Secretary of State, right? They're public. You can go and look any of them up. Those are not private corporations. The private entities are those that when you do a search, you just simply cannot locate them. You're not going to find the private trusts. You're not going to find those private entities that are operating in the private sector, supporting and helping the United States economy. You're just not going to find them. You're not going to find them.
And when they say private sector, they intentionally do not explain what that is or what it means. They allow you to use your limited education and knowledge to assume you think you know what that means. And they're okay with that because you're wrong 100% of the time. So many scenarios are on the table in the public that allow you to assume whatever you want to assume about it. As long as you continue to remain an incompetent minor, a slave, a U.S. citizen, we're okay with it. Continue to work that 9-to-5 job. We're okay with it. Continue to file W-2 taxes every single year. We're okay with it. It means to us, you are incompetent.
Don't you all know that the government depends on the private sector for stability? See, a lot of people think that the government controls the economy, But the truth of the matter is that the private sector is the economy. Let that sink in. All right. When the government shuts down, federal spending stops, right? Contractors are not paid. You all saw that. You saw the issues that arose with the government shutdown. Pilots were not getting paid. Federal contractors were not getting paid. Federal workers were not getting paid, right? This is the market sort of destabilized, right? So the shutdown, it froze the cash flow. All right. And so that's an issue. It's an underlying issue. That was a deliberate pressure point. That was a manufactured crisis. I hope that people can see that was a manufactured crisis, because during the government shutdown, there was a restructuring that was taking place. It was a complete restructuring. Do not forget that the central bank digital currency is still on the table. And so during the government shutdown, I believe is when the IRS made the announcement that they're going to be going completely digital, right? That they're going to be issuing, they're not going to be issuing paper checks anymore. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there was definitely some things that have happened behind the scenes during the government shutdown. And so they facilitate these crises because they like to use these crises as a monetary weapon, right? To instill fear in the people. But you have to be empowered. And the only way that you're going to be empowered is to get yourself properly structured so that when these types of things happen, you're not affected. You can just keep trucking. You just want to keep moving. Right? You got to keep moving. So how many of y'all know someone that was affected by the government shutdown? Put a 5 in the chat if you know someone that was personally affected by the government shutdown. Oh, those 5s are coming in. Someone says, we continue to live in the inversion of what the Most High is asking of us. That is true. That is very, very, oh man, there's a lot of 5s. Yeah. I'm pretty sure everyone knows someone that was affected by the government shutdown, but the question is what are they going to do? What would you do if your whole life was turned upside down because you lost your benefits that you were dependent on for the last 10 years? I know people that have been on public assistance for 20 years. 20 years. That's crazy. Yes, we have to stop eating out of the palms of their hands. Scripture says, trust not thine enemy. Do you know who your enemies are? Who are your enemies? Because I don't think most people understand who their enemies are. Who is them? No, I need you to spell it out for me. Who specifically are your enemies? Because if you know who your enemies are, then you'll know how to move forward and take the proper steps to deal with them. When the Most High said, come out of her, Babylon, that was the creation of the private trust relationship. Now that's a great comment, and that is so very true. Someone says our enemy is the system. No, specifically, who are your enemies, folks? So when you're speaking about, oh, they did this, who are the they, the quote unquote they that people are speaking about? And we spoke about this recently on our Sabbath call. Do you all remember? We spoke about who the enemy is. Who's the they that's facilitating these manufactured crises, this manufactured inflation? There you go. The international bankers. Someone says any entity that is frauding and leading you in disbelief. Yes, yes, and yes. Now, some of these comments I'm not going to read out loud because we are live on YouTube. And we want to make sure that our videos stay up, right? But yes, I see exactly where you all are coming from. So the question is what are you going to do to start the transition? Now, some of you all missed the private Genesis Gateway call that we had this last Wednesday. And I was really hoping to see more of you on the call. We had a really good discussion. People came with their Q&As, and we got a lot of questions answered. So you all are going to want to get into the gateway so that you can have a more private conversation. All right. And so just a reminder, make sure that you're checking your emails. Make sure that you're staying connected. If you're watching this video from YouTube, you want to go ahead and get back with the person that invited you to the call or speak to the administrator of that YouTube channel. Okay? Make sure that you access the free course materials that are provided to you via email. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, if you weren't just simply invited to the YouTube channel, you may not have access to the free course material, and that is all the more reason why you're going to want to get with the administrator of the YouTube channel that you're watching this broadcast on so that you can gain access to the free course material. Right? Very important. Because people, to be honest with you, in order for you to really know how to navigate, you have to get some education underneath your belt. We can't just go day by day and fly by night thinking that we know exactly what's happening out here in the world of Babylon. We have to know how to maneuver. We have to know how to strategically maneuver through the system, utilizing trust technology. That is very important. So we need to become educated. Got to become educated. Because I can almost guarantee you that many people didn't know that if you're properly structured using a trust, that you're not affected by inflation. Right? So a lot of these manufactured crises just simply won't take place if you get if you move forward with, in the proper way and get yourself properly structured. It takes a lot to do this. It really does. And so instead of you trying to figure this out on your own, you need to be part of a think tank type scenario where you are discussing and strategizing and thinking and moving together so that you can figure this thing out. Because you can't figure it out based on your limited understanding. There's not enough time in the day for you to understand everything that there is to understand on your own. It's not enough time. It's just not enough time. So you got to ask yourself a question. What is the next step for you? But I can tell you what the next step is for us. We're going to be back here next week. Same time, 7:15 p.m. Eastern Time, on the same channel that you're watching this broadcast on, and on the same Zoom link that you've registered for. We're going to be here every single week. So we invite you to come back. We invite you to join in on the discussion. Does anyone have any questions? Was this helpful to you? Was the information presented this evening helpful? You have to let us know so that we can make the proper adjustments to give you what you need week after week. And Mikhail.
And Nadiva.
Mm-hmm.
One thing stood out to me. You asked a question. The response was to put a 5 in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
The question that you asked was, if anyone knew anyone that was affected by the government shutdown, if you knew anyone that was affected, place a 5 in the chat. And when I saw that, it made me think, if you have the answer that they're looking for, did you share that answer with them? Now, for those who put a 5 in the chat, you said you knew someone that was affected by the government shutdown. Did you invite them on this call? Did you tell them that I have the answer you're looking for so you never have to worry or be concerned about a government shutdown? Because a government shutdown only affected those in the public, but not in the private. That right there alone will have those individuals running to jump on this call that we're on this evening. So those who put a 5 in the chat, this is for you. You need to go back to those individuals that you stated you know that were affected by the government shutdown. Invite them on the call. There's something they need to hear. There's something here that's just for them. That's why we're here, for those individuals and others just like them.
Mm-hmm.
So keep that in mind when you come in contact with those who are being affected out there. They don't know where to turn. And if they speak to you, if they share with you the effect that the government shutdown had on them, they're the ones that need to be on this call.
Someone says, I share and people look at me like I'm an alien and out of my mind. That is so very true. But you know what that means? That means that you are, the Most High brought you clarity and wisdom so that your way of thinking is set apart from the rest of the world and those people that are around you. He made you special for that reason so that you can go back to those people and share. And it doesn't mean that you have to try to convince them. You literally just have to drop a seed. It can be something as small as just giving out a link or sharing a link or saying something small to drop the seed and allowing someone else to come along and water that seed, right? And someone else says, Babylon is a maze living, and I come out of her and control things. The matrix is a labyrinth of passageways and dead ends.
Very true. And when I see this this message in the chat, I share and people look at me like I'm an alien and out of my mind. We have all at one time or another been in this scenario, but we learn how to feed individuals and not overfeed them and not give them too much information, but give them enough to think about the fact that what if there's another way to look at this situation? What if there's another answer on the table that you're not seeing? You know, you ask questions. You ask the question, they begin to think. That's what you want to do. And to those who put a 5 in the chat, you already have someone that you can ask questions to. Present your questions to them. I know this government shutdown has affected you, but some people are not affected. What if you were like those other people who were not affected by the government shutdown?
Yeah.
It makes them think. I know there's people out there that were not affected by the government shutdown. What are they doing? And what if you could do what they're doing? Then you wouldn't be stressed. You wouldn't be concerned. You wouldn't be affected. That's where the conversation goes. That's how it starts. You give them something to think about and you can walk away. If you give them something to think about and walk away, if it's valuable enough, if it's got some substance behind it, they will come looking for you for more information. That's very important. And that's what you must do. Go ahead.
I don't know. I don't know if people are ready for that conversation. I don't know. You know, sometimes it can be easier said than done. When you say, yeah, go talk to people, because many people, they fear man more so than they fear the Most High, right? So they're worried about, you know, what people think and things of that nature. But here's the key. If you get the education, you'll develop the confidence. And that's why we're here. Is to help nurture that confidence so that you can not only do something that can empower yourself, but you can help to stabilize your family and empower others. That's essentially why we're here. That's the main reason. And trust me, I understand. We understand. It's not easy, especially with people that you know. You know, the Messiah, when he went back to his hometown, he couldn't perform any miracles. He couldn't perform any miracles. Why do you think that is? It's because the people knew him and they were trying to keep him in a box. They were like, wait a minute, isn't that the carpenter's son? Right. So when people look at you, they see you for what they think you are. They've known you your whole life. And so it can be difficult for family to receive or friends to receive what it is that you're saying. But you know that you're special and set apart. And the Most High placed you in a position for a very specific reason to hear this. All right. So we would encourage you to come back week after week and just gain and absorb the information and just make sure that you're taking notes. But most importantly, come inside of the Genesis Gateway so that you can get your questions answered. That's going to be important. Just come into the gateway. So again, this evening, what we're going to do is send out another email blast that's going to invite people into the gateway. There is a recording that's up from last week that those of you who missed that call, you're going to want to go back and review. It's in there for you to go back and listen to. And it was a really good call. Go back and listen to that call. All right. But again, like I said, we're going to be here week after week, just hoping and praying that we can empower someone to move forward or speak up and try to assist either themselves or someone else to move forward in some way that is positive, that, creates positive outcomes. So, any final thoughts, questions, comments before we close out for this evening? Anything?
Everybody should invite a friend. Invite a friend to hear some information that would be beneficial to them.
Yeah.
Just invite a friend.
That's it, folks. Invite a friend. And you come back too. And you continue to come back as well. That's important. So yeah, before we close, we again want to thank you all for taking the time out to join us this evening. We do not take your time for granted. We know that you can easily be doing something else. And we hope, and pray that the information that we're sharing is beneficial to you all. These types of conversations are warranted, and the topics will continue to develop over time. But we do thank you all so very much for spending this hour with us. You can go back to the respective YouTube channel and watch the replays. You can share the links out for the YouTube channels. We definitely want to grow the following of each respective channel that is sharing this broadcast so that we can continue to get the word out and share the good news. It's a lot that's going to be happening. So you all just pay attention to what's going on out there in the world. Pay attention to what you're hearing on social media, because something is definitely brewing and things are going to change dramatically, right? And it's going to be a lot of people affected. So you have to ask yourself a question. Are you going to be a proponent of change, or are you going to be participating in more of the same, right? There is a separation that is currently taking place. All right. So these are some things that we need to think about. But all praises to the Most High for just allowing us to have this call, these sessions each week, and bring the information to you all. So we do hope that this was helpful to you all. Mikael, any closing thoughts, comments before we end?
No, I believe that's all that we need to share this evening. I hope everybody comes in contact with someone who needs help and is looking for answers.
Absolutely. All right. You all have a great evening, and we will see you next week.